Welcome to the 1% Better Recruitment Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Kiriakou. If you're new around here, this podcast ultimately aims to get you 1% better every single episode, but it's unlike most recruitment podcasts. We have a lot of fun on this show. We share some crazy stories, wild anecdotes. We talk about some things that you probably won't hear on most recruitment podcasts. But at the end of the day, my whole goal is to elevate the industry at least 1% after each episode. You probably noticed I'm wearing my Milo t-shirt. So myself and two other trainers have set up a new business, which is AI role plays, AI coaching, backed with over 100 videos from 3 expert trainers in the recruitment field. So if you are interested in that, we are in the process now of trying to raise some funding. So we need all the help that we can get, but it's going to be such an exciting product to take to market. So yeah, if you want to get involved in that, reach out to us. And if you are enjoying the podcast and you're not following on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or subscribing here on YouTube, what the heck are you doing? Let's get into this week's episode. I hope you guys enjoy. Austin, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. Obviously, we've spoken for, every now and then for the last couple of years or so since I set up my business, and I've gone full circle having you on the show finally. For people that may or may not know you, just tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and give us a bit of an intro.
Yeah, okay. Nice to see you, Charles. So I'm Austin Clark, co-founder of SCI Partners and Entrust Resource Solutions. So we're a full cycle resourcing recruitment partner for the primarily for the life sciences sector on an international scale. But through both brands, we cover a bench to board scenario for all kind of STEM categories is what we kind of cover. Our business has been around for 15 years, we've gone through an interesting period, as many recruitment businesses have. But I think we feel that we've done some of the right stuff to get us through 25, and we're looking forward to what 2026 has in store.
Absolutely. We've got some wicked topics to go through today. What you just said, or what Austin just said there about the interesting journey he's been on. We spoke a little bit about this when we caught up last week, I think it was, and I said this is going to be great for the podcast. As I mentioned to Austin, and for people that listen to this podcast, they'll be familiar that we don't just talk about pure success. Like everyone that comes on is, I bill £1 million and our business has grown to 1,000 heads. It's all about like the raw, real stories of recruitment firms. And I don't think there's any shadow of a doubt that it hasn't been the easiest market in the world the last few years. So we'll talk through Austin's journey that he's been on. The life sciences market, as Austin explained to me, has been quite challenging over the last couple of years. So he's going to go into that, talk about the pivots that they've made, the lessons that they've learned. And then we're going to finish up talking around the dying art of the basics in recruitment, something that I bang on about as a coach and as a trainer all the time, and occasionally get called old school on LinkedIn for telling people to be on the phone more. I never thought that would be deemed old school when I first got into recruitment, but anyway, we'll talk about that. So let's start off then, Austin, about the journey that you guys have been on, especially in the last few years, where, when we spoke a few weeks ago, you talked about headcount, tech stack, these types of things, and really looking at those things and I guess pivoting and learning from things that have happened. So tell us a little bit about the journey you guys have been on.
Yeah, so I think our journey's been interesting from the very beginning. The humble kind of start of where we ventured from, which was a Scotland base, which then took us on a journey through organic growth, through some acquisitions that we did probably 7-8 years back now. That have had varying degrees of success in terms of building new geographies across the UK, and also building another brand in SCI Partners to give us an exec search type arm. I think going back for the last couple of years, we were very much flowing on to a bit of a growth journey, where the business had performed particularly well throughout COVID, which was probably aligned to the sector that we were in. A lot of vaccine led approaches, lab-based scenarios for spinning COVID samples, etc., which led us to thinking we were coming out the back end of that like many, where recruitment was. So yeah, we've taken some investment to try and grow that a bit quicker, to push that a little bit quicker, and give us an opportunity to try and grow out into the international markets that we look after from a UK base. Our drivers were very much to try and look at a US launch, And I think the market then started to get, quite sticky. For one reason or another, I think, life sciences has certainly taken a knock from, the areas at early stage embryonic companies that we were very much focused on, not gaining the investment levels that they hoped they were going to be grabbing hold of. So we've kind of, we've had to go through a real right sizing program, which is never a great thing in terms of bringing great people into the business and then having to look at, certain functions that, we could live without, and look at, potentially what the new norm looks like over the course of the next sort of 6 to 18 months. But we probably grew headcount up to around about 30 individuals, based out of our centres in Dundee in Scotland, in Manchester, and also down in the south in the city in London. We're down to now, 12 headcount. And I think it's satisfying, what's been a tough 24 and certainly been a tougher 25, but a little bit better than 24. I think as we venture into 26, I think we're probably at the right size to then put in different fundamentals of how we approach delivery, how we approach selling, how we approach, our kind of resourcing or sourcing type structures. So yeah, it's been an interesting move to end up with headcount. I think headcount was always a driver for us, but I think it's certainly been a bit of a vanity project more than anything else.
Yeah, it's interesting what you just said there about the vanity project, because when I first got into recruitment in 2014, you heard a lot of businesses, especially ones based in London and the key cities, and companies that were having plans to scale out into America. There was always this want to get to 100 heads, like phrase that people would say. You didn't really hear, I mean, they must have been saying about like profit and things like that, but it was always like, I want to be on LinkedIn as a founder and show everyone that I have 100 heads and I've got an office out in New York, an office in London, Manchester, and everywhere else. But I don't know whether it's since COVID, and maybe you can educate me on this, but I've noticed a lot that businesses now have noticed that the less headcount that you have, the more profitable you are, and the more flexibility. Again, everyone's different, but the more flexibility you have, and you don't have to worry about someone that hasn't billed for 4 or 5 months, but they're a really good guy. Like a lot of businesses have started to, I guess, strive towards lower headcount, tight on the tech stack, and just high profitability. I don't know if that's something you've seen.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I think it's interesting to see what you look at as a good consultant. If you're looking at it from a revenue, purely revenue play, and also what the performance of that is, taking in all the costs that kind of strips back with that particular individual. But I think for us, it's carried a cost line that you just can't support or you just can't predict. Because the customer swing going the way the customer swings went, or investments or internal decisions being made that we just can't control, no matter how close we are to these individual organisations. So I think we truly believe that the people we've got in the business today, and what we can nurture and what we can do with those individuals, can be far more, can be adopted far more towards client relationship building, proper business development, marketing into existing customers as much as new client acquisition, which I think has been the hardest thing for us to pick up over the last 18 months, just because people are deciding not to do anything at all, or not make a change, or there's nothing happening. So I think having the right people, being able to get into the right rooms and have the right discussions and talk about true partnership, I don't think it necessarily links back to having a huge depth of headcount. I think there's other things that we could be utilising, looking at offshoring, looking at and the commitment that you get from an offshore and people working for international companies is incredible. And we could come back to that a bit later. But I think there's still sort of tech stacks that we could be picking up, because I think the cost of running a consultant is a lot higher today than it was 10 years ago. So we've got to be in the best shape possible, commit to the clients that we're committing to. We can partner with them in the manner that we hope we can partner with them, and they can see true value in exactly what it is we're trying to achieve. And it's not just around fee for placement. It's not just around transactional recruitment, and coming in once in the year and never going back in. It's about trying to stick with these businesses, because we can be on site, we can be in the room, we can understand the pitfalls, we can understand the challenges, understand the problems. Because I think without that, you're just a supplier that's shooting into the dark.
Mm. And I think some business, well, a lot of businesses I speak to at least, are striving to be more of that partner in recruitment rather than just the supplier on a PSL whacking CVs across. But when you talk about the headcount piece, when I work with businesses that are startup level, very small businesses that are beginning to scale and hire people, something that I always say, and I've heard this been said so many times around hire quick, fire faster. I recently had this with a client where they had a trainee. Obviously, I'm not going to name any names, but I've never seen anyone that wanted it more than this guy. And he had some personal issues that he was dealing with, and he was taking action with that. And he was showing up on time, staying late, putting in a load of effort. But sometimes someone just isn't going to work, but because they are really working hard and really showing that they want it, you kind of not giving them the benefit of the doubt, but they've got the attitude, right? And it's if you don't have the skill yet, but you have the attitude, surely the skill will kind of eventually get to the part where your attitude is. But I personally, like, there's two parts of my brain. You've got like the angel and the demon, right? The angel says this person's like got a great attitude, they're positive, they're working hard. But then like the little devil on my shoulder is like they're not going to work. Your gut says they're not going to work. They're not right for this business. Maybe they need to work for a slightly bigger business or whatever. I don't know whether you've been through a period where you have obviously downsized, where you've looked at certain consultants. And as you mentioned there, it's obviously very expensive these days to run their desk, for example. What's your thoughts, especially for people maybe listening that, wanting to scale, but maybe haven't done that before? Like what things have you learned when it comes to people that you've had to look at and say, right, okay, we kind of have to move them along type thing? Hey guys, quick one before we jump back into the episode. If you are a recruiter who feels like half your week disappears into admin, follow-ups, data cleaning, and jumping between several different tools, then listen up, because this episode is officially sponsored by Sourcewell. Sourcewell is the recruitment productivity platform, and I don't just mean another tool that you'll forget to use. I mean the tool that actually gives you your time back. You can run your entire desk in one place. Outreach, sourcing, data enrichment, multi-step email and LinkedIn sequences, inbox management, and even call notes. It's all there, synced, automated, and according to their stats, recruiters using Sourcewell see 56% higher response rates, double the pipeline, and approximately save around 8 hours of admin every single week. If you're like me, admin as a recruiter is the devil, and this productivity platform really helps you save a load of time. So reach out to Sourcewell, go to sourcewell.com. It's a fantastic platform. I've used it myself. I really believe in it, and I'm super grateful for them sponsoring the podcast. Let's get back into the episode.
I think listen, recruitment's tough, right? It's tough. You've either got a love for it. I find it hard to kind of sit here and say 26 years ago I started in recruitment, and it's one of those that you fell into. But even through that period of time, you can see so many people either love it and stick with it, or it's not for them. I think it's it needs commitment, it needs focus, it needs a want, and I think it comes back to the why. Like, people have got to ask themselves why are they doing this? Why do they want to do this? What do they think it is that they're going to gain out of this? It can't just all be about a monetary reward. And thinking that that's the only objective, because there's so much pain. I think there's, if you look at it, it's probably 10%, happy moments, and 90%, 90%
Yep.
you're battling with yourself in a day-to-day, week-to-week type scenario. I think, woke mentality and things like that, that comes up. And, when's the best time to be speaking to people? It's in the evening. If people don't want to work, if you're headhunting people at certain areas, you're not going to get them through the day. They're working. The good people are in there. They're in jobs. They're in roles. So you've got to be that. You've got to be determined, and you've got to have the tenacity that I think you've always had, and potentially more. So I think you can only do so much diligence on people before you come in. And it's a two-way street at an interview, isn't it? But I think there's got to be a likelihood that you can work with these people. People will often sell you a song. People that have been around and done it for years. They talk about yesterday, talk about where they worked before. If it was that great, why are you still there? I think over and above that, I think what we're looking at definitely from a inspirational point of view going forward is the people that are on the up. The people that are coming through that have not hit that ceiling or hit that best year they've ever towards that, but they've got the fight. They've got the real fight. They've got the determination. They've got the ability to appeal to a wide audience. They could read a room, they could work a room, they could read a room, they could understand the room, they could absolutely apply, the true traditional business development type processes and stick with the process. Because it doesn't happen overnight. Rome was never built in a day when it comes to anything, but certainly recruitment. It's a competitive space, it's a noisy space. And people that are either coming into it as complete fresh starters in this world, or they've been working in this particular arena. People are buying differently. So it's not what's yesterday is certain it's going to work again tomorrow or the next day. But it's keeping that relationship, that rapport building, that monitoring the right things, that being really interested in the environments that they're trying to tackle from a service provision. And ultimately, that's what we are. We work in the sector that we're in. We're massively knowledgeable in the space that we operate in. A lot of people that have come through, working as scientists, right through to, then going into a commercial world and wanting to apply that to changing people's life and changing the direction of a business. But we're ultimately providing the solution. We're ultimately providing a staffing solution, or trying to be an extension to a TA or HR type environment, or be that environment, because they're a very early stage company that just don't have, the bandwidth to carry an HR TA type function. And there's lots of different solutions we could come up with. There's not a one size fits all for us. But I certainly think that people have got to have that ability to understand, and it not just be about cash signals. It's got to be that they want to help. They want to understand that business. They want to get underneath the bonnet of that business. To truly be able to apply what we believe our business can offer. And we are fairly, going back to headcount and going back to, even the size that we were once at. We're very agile. We're not restricted by any corporate governance. It's still very, very much owned, by myself and two others. And I think we can make decisions very quick, but for us, it's about applying the right attitude, the right drive, and striving towards the common goal in a true partnership type way.
Yeah. Well, going back to what you said a second ago about, for recruiters wanting to not even necessarily just hearing like the buying signals, but wanting to help, wanting to be a partner, wanting to understand the pain points and the needs of a client. I think it kind of, and I wanted to touch on something in a second as well before I forget, but I think it boils back to this sounds really basic when I say this, by the way, but a key aspect of being a good recruiter is being able to simply have a conversation with someone. And there is an aspect of being able to teach someone to have a conversation. But then at the same time, there are some people, I've got friends that if we're in a pub and someone overhears us talking about something or whatever, some of my friends could just have a chat. They could say some small talk, it might get deep, whatever. Other of my friends would just be like that, and just get really awkward. They'll just freeze, and trying to have a conversation with someone on the phone, they're just like my wife hates speaking to people on the phone. She's great with people, she's phenomenal. She hates speaking on the phone. So when she hears me making sales calls and I'm like, oh, that client said not right now, she's like, well, just don't hound them anymore. I'm like, well, no, because that's not how business development works. I have to keep on them. And I've won clients after speaking to them 5 years ago, and they've become a great client and stuff. But I think that key skill of just being able to pick up the phone, ask some questions, show a bit of interest, actively demonstrate you're listening, and just learn from that person. And that goes back to one thing we'll talk about in more detail later. But I feel like, and I hate when people say, oh, it's the new generation. Because when I first got into recruitment, everyone said millennials were lazy and all the rest of it. I don't think all of them are, but I think that's like a lost art almost. Like some people just don't know how to just have a chat with someone about anything.
Yeah. Listen, I think the great recruiters in the world some of them wouldn't even recognize themselves as a salesperson. But there's no getting away from the fact that recruitment is a sales job. It's got an art of selling. You've got to be relevant. You've got to be able to do just what you've described there. Open up a discussion, hold that discussion, be relevant in the room about what you're actually trying to discuss and trying to put across. Because it's competitive again, but people buy from people. There's no getting away from it. And I think the avoidance of being able to pick up the phone, the avoidance to, like you say, open a discussion, form a discussion, force an agenda. I think that's lost in business development. People are just trying to sell when the people that are hungry and try and sell I don't think they've always got an agenda to take to the room to actually drive a proper business conversation, and it just ends up a chat.
Yeah.
But to get people to pick up the phone and do that in the first place is an art that's definitely gone away. And I think I was brought up in a recruitment era where that was all you had. You had no tech, you had no WhatsApp, you had no you had email, you never had LinkedIn. You were running with a phone and a Rolodex. So
Yeah.
I think it's those are bygone days. But I think for me, I don't think that piece changes, and I definitely think that that's the traditional elements of recruitment. The humanization of what you can humanize and remain done with a human element is that it's the art of
Mm,
discussion. It's the art of being able to drive that in the first instance
mhm.
and understand that no matter what tech stack you bring in, no matter what automation you bring in, there is nobody going to come back to you from 25, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 emails that they're getting every day, and you're the one that they pick out and respond to. So it's how we drive interest, it's how we drive authority, it's how we
Yeah.
we push the part of the successes that we've got, the business that's sitting behind them. We're creating a platform, but people have got to take that platform and make that platform better by pushing their take on it, their personality over that. That overlays everything, because it goes back to that point. People properly buy from people,
Yeah.
no matter what brand's above the door. And I don't think that expectation changes from one recruitment business to the next. And we've seen that over the years. Lots of businesses or lots of people just, oh, I don't like it here, I'll jump to the next. And that opportunity was certainly there at one point. But I think
Mm,
that's completely gone. So I'm convinced that the average recruiters that can be very, very good in a busy, buoyant market are absolutely struggling today. But I think the really good people that have those traits and have
mhm.
that outlook and have that drive and desire to do that and understand that that's fundamentally 80% of the role, they're the ones that will make a massive difference. They're the ones that will
Mm,
be seen. They're the ones that will drive performance. That will drive new business opportunities.
mm.
That will create opportunities that sit outside of just transactional placement to placement. And build far more robust partnerships
Mm.
with businesses because of the different services they can provide. They understand what they want at the times that they want them, and that will be the difference.
Yeah, oh,
100%.
100%. Well, something interesting actually might make you laugh. The last training academy that I did, we were talking about client calling openers, like various different ones, from your reverse headhunt to your standard cold call, your name drop, all the rest of it. And when we talked through like the structure of the intro and kind of what your personal and company pitch is, I went through something on the presentation that said company USPs and personal USPs, because they had never really done a full day of recruitment because they've been in training 3 days a week and they've been doing some like activities on desk. They couldn't really think too much around what their personal USPs were, right? So I had to try and break it down and say, look, when I first started in recruitment, I got told that I was very good at building relationships. I was very genuine, I was honest and caring. So I used that when I spoke to clients and said, if you work with me, I'm a very genuine, honest, hardworking person. So those were my personal USPs, and I still use them to this day. So I got them to brainstorm some ideas, and then I got the director to sit in. So I got them to stand up in front of the cohort. Didn't tell them this, by the way, because part of my style is to get people really uncomfortable, because that's the job. So I just said, right, okay, you're going to stand up, you're going to do your intro. Everyone give them a round of applause. They've obviously shat themselves thinking, oh my God, the director's in the room and now I've got to do my intro to Charles. Oh God. And then when I said, like, they did their intro, I was like, right, so tell me a little bit about you. Why should I work with you? Right, so we've been running for 20 years and da 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 da. And then the director went, right, stop. Right, okay, you're just telling us about the business. Like, what about you? Like, what makes you unique? Why should I work with you as an individual? And they froze because, again, they don't have any evidence to back up whether they are going to be a good recruiter yet. They've not really passed their academy yet. And the director explained to them, was like, look, if you continue here and you're successful, you're going to get clients call you. They're not going to call the office line 9 and say, "Oh yeah, we want to call, recruitment business A for some job." They're going to call you. And he goes, "I get people calling me, candidates and clients, all the time because I've given them a good service because they've been recommended to me by so and so." And I even put my hand up and said, "I've not been doing recruitment per se for nearly 5 years now. I sometimes get candidates and clients text me saying, "You're free for a chat. I'm looking for a sales rep." I'm like, mate, I've not been doing this for a very long time. But it's because, like, as to your point, people buy from the recruiter. Yes, it's great if you've got a household brand behind you and you've got company evidence to back it up. But that's a key thing for like recruiters listening. Like, you need to show people why they should work with you. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
I
it's
think the
about
key. I think
you.
that absolutely, and I think the key thing with with household brands is that certainly in a general world, they're shrinking. These things are shrinking like mad. A lot of these role types that they would get, admin level things, whether it's commercial or industrial, they're getting soaked up by internal groups. But the inconsistency with those businesses is that they can be like a revolving door. Now we're trying to protect that like mad, in terms of the hiring that we do make, and going back was never part of the agenda for us. But I think that that's the bit that people have actually got to believe. What we're providing is a platform, an opportunity. And it's down to that individual to not, think they're going to be spoon-fed, to truly come in, take what we've built over the last 15 years and make it better. The business and the company only improves with the people that are in it. It's or you'd be as well being a one-man band. That's the reality. But I think that's the attitude. That's the type that we're certainly very interested to be having conversations with. Depending on, there'll be varying situations as to why these people are out in the market, but there will be some great people out in the market that have been affected by situational changes, right sizing, and I think it's about what comes next, and it's about people remaining interested and having the appetite to stay in this segment of a sector, to stay in the recruitment world. We talked about this thing I was at yesterday. I was telling you about, it's the recruitment revolution or recruitment evolution. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah.
I think it's needed forever, because everybody can't be in recruitment just because it's an easy option. I think the people that are in it need to be in it because they want to be in it, for one, or they can make a difference and an impact while they're in it. And they truly get great pleasure out of, like you say, being interested, being relevant, having that empathy towards people and the situation that's in the company to marry the two things together. And it could be a great world, if we get that bit right as a business, the people have got that attitude towards it. Listen, this could be a wonderful place for people to really carve out a great career in and grow with a company like ourselves.
Well, I try and explain to my friends, because when I was I'm going to turn 32 in about a month. And when I was 21, 22 years old and I started to work, because I started as an apprentice on like borderline illegal money and no commission. And then when I started to earn commission and I was a contract recruiter to begin with, and my book was getting really healthy, my friends were like finishing up uni in bags worth of debt, and we were going to like the student uni clubs and stuff, and I'd go and buy a round of shots, and it was nothing for me because obviously I'm earning money and everyone thinks I'm absolutely loaded. And then when I moved into the city where there was an actual, because some recruitment firms, they're quite cowboy, right? They don't have like a clear progression structure. You're senior because you've been there for 4 years, but you don't have a title change. There's no L&D practice. It's not even an operator. Anyway, when I moved into London and worked for I'd say a real firm that had that clear progression structure, you do this number of billings and you show these attitudes, you get promoted. I always said to my friends, like, they look at me on LinkedIn saying, my God, you're a business development manager. You were senior a few months back. Now you're a sales manager. Like, that's crazy. And I always used to say to people, like, this industry, this is why I'm so passionate about it. There's barely any other industries that if you come in, work really hard, you're positive, you add to the culture, and you do what you're there to do, i.e. your KPIs, your numbers, your career trajectory, and I'm sure you've seen this yourself in your career, you see some people that are 25 years old, that are associate directors, and also you see also young 20-year-olds that set up alone after doing the job for 4 years and go, actually, I've worked side by side with my MD. I see how he does it. I could probably do this myself. I'm sure there are other industries, but like, how many other industries can you progress your career that quickly, learn serious life skills that don't just help you in the job, but for other things, and also earn what some would say insulting levels of money? I get asked quite a lot by people who listen to the podcast what I do and how I can help them. So just to give you a bit of an intro, I work with anything from trainee to founder and everything in between within the recruitment space, and offer coaching and training services. So if it's business development, mindset, confidence, if it's even the advanced thing like the NLP, hypnotic language patterns to help influence get higher terms, selling RPOs, retainers, all those types of things, and everything I do around the coaching basis is very, very practical. It's not just theory. I work one-to-one with people. I work with large recruitment teams. A lot of what I do is on site. A lot of what I can do can be remote as well. I've worked with businesses all over the world since doing my own business. So if you are interested in getting 1% better and want to work with someone that can help you on that basis, and there's a clear ROI, I've worked with people people that have 10x their ROI working with me in just 3 months. So if you are interested, all my details are in the description of this, and of course on LinkedIn. So drop us a message and let's work together.
Yeah, good. I think I look at that kind of two ways. I think it is great that you could drive and you could carve this, this career out that other industries or other professions wouldn't give you. But at the end of the day, we are a professional service, and should be seen as that and deemed as that all of the time. I think in some cases, we've got consultant development plans, and a lot of it over a period of time, we've looked at it, it has been based on billings, but then the expectation changes, so they've got to be prepared for that expectation to grow with that. I think the biggest challenge when you've got a development plan that's only based on that on a performance level is that are they actually managers? Because consultants one day, they come in the following day, they're now the manager. How does that mind shift? How does that, their mindset change towards that? So I think it's got to be a bit more deeper than that, and I do think that this modern way of kind of looking at how things can work, with different structures, different org structures that have got, AI, and they've got bots, and they've got people and humanization of stuff. I think you can drive people towards the areas that they actually thrive in, and rather than just becoming a title based move.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that that's always right. I think you end up with some of your biggest performers ending up becoming managers, and they don't like it because they don't want to manage people, they just want to build. So there's a lot of kind of thinking going around that. And I think in the modern world, or what the new norm will certainly look like, and some of the actions that could come from AI and tech stack and tools, I think it's getting that humanization and getting people really, interested in those types of job roles, because I think they will look very different. I think the other thing that will look very different is that, bonus schemes, commission structures, they're pretty antiquated. They've never changed in years, so the things that you're actually asking people to do today compared to what you were asking them to do before, they're probably completely out of kilter of what they need to be. So that, I think all of these things need refined. But that will all come, and certainly from inside our business as well. I think it will come from, the right sizing that's been put in place, the direction that we're trying to take, which we believe is a step change, a massive step change in what this could actually generate and do for our structure, our company. I think productivity, giving capacity back, allowing people to do. I've never ever thought that you get great delivery people and great salespeople in one body. It doesn't exist. It's hard. I've always thought a 360 recruiter is one of the biggest challenging things. I think a billing manager is a really challenging thing, because how do they get impact or effect out of people and still hit a number? There's different strokes, isn't there? There's different ways to look at it. But I think the mechanics of what we're trying to design in terms of what that org piece will play into a human capital element and a tech capital element, I think will be for the greater good. I think the new norm and the evolution of this piece, that, as I said, from a recruitment evolution piece, I think it's actually really exciting. In a time that's felt a bit low and a bit we've got to get through, and I think it's really exciting to see what the prospect of that kind of looks like. And listen, there's we're seeing some unbelievable results from companies that are already made the change. They're already doing this. Are we behind the curve? We may be a little bit slower to the party with it, but I think it changes the dynamic in every single component of our business. I don't think it just changes in one area. I think it drives a different value right across the board.
I think if I was to set up a recruitment firm tomorrow, and I started off with trainees, I think I would probably look at 360 to begin with, but I would create 2 avenues for delivery, starting at delivery consultant, trainee sales executive, BD, and then going up to like delivery director, manager, business development manager, director, etc. And then the 360, your standard trainee consultant, RC, SRC, principal, and then a separate route for leadership. And I've done this with some businesses where I've broke down that. Just because, as to your point, just because you have someone that bills really well and is a great person in the office doesn't mean that they're going to be a good manager. And if you don't have that leadership training and coaching available, because when I first got promoted to manager, I had natural leadership traits, not management traits. I didn't manage. I just led. I was like, this is how I'm going to do it. You're going to follow me. Great. Didn't do any inspections. I didn't do any sort of manager meetings. It was just pure leading from the front type thing. So yeah, I would probably have those things there. And I like the idea of, because you and I spoke about this, about I was not good at sourcing, but if you gave me a list of candidates, I was phenomenal at building relationship, qualifying, getting leads. Like I was great at that. But then trawling through LinkedIn and adding candidates to a project was like mind-numbingly boring. And also my attention to detail with that type of stuff, because I didn't find it as interesting, was so much lower in comparison to people I hired that loved sitting in front of LinkedIn and looking at the CV and spotting things and going, that person will be great. Put them in front of a list of 1,000 people to call to generate business. They get one rejection and they're like, oh God, I'm following up 20, 30, 40 times over 2, 3, 4 years and building relationships, meeting them at trade shows and stuff. That was my key thing. So I think, yeah, that's how I would probably map that out in my head if I was to set up a recruitment firm. But I hear a lot of people that kind of debate, you know, is 360 dead, or is delivery consult, like what happens if we hire delivery consultants and then the market dips, what do they do? Like what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, in the world we live in today, and everything that like going back to tech stack and and AI. I mean, listen, I don't think for a minute that AI is going to take away a number of areas from a human aspect, but it's getting that bit right. What can you automate? What can you keep from a human standpoint? You know, I've never ever been a believer in the 360 piece. I think someone gives. You end up fighting all the time to get a client on here, and one drops off the back because you can't. You're not managing the client relationship. You're not, and because you go that way, and then you focus back on delivery. I'm a big believer in kind of having this kind of 180 play. And I'm more interested now in having people at the front end that are kind of, of a senior level, of the people coming up, like I mentioned. So the key people that we've got in the business today. I mean, the average, tenure or experience in recruitment probably sits between 15 and 20 years. I think that's a great platform to build on, to get the people that are coming through. And the people that are coming through will probably give these people a run for the money because they've got no qualms to do the things that they might restrict themselves from doing. So I think that's the way we will go. I think in terms of delivery, we will have delivery that's obviously based here in the UK or in other geographies as we go that way. But I definitely think the offshoring piece for me in terms of what we've identified in South Africa, I think we've got a great option there that will absolutely, the level of detail, the level of focus, I think we could potentially get 3x what you could get from one head here in the UK doing a delivery type role, purely delivery. And as long as it's engaged in your business, embedded in your business, the way that they would just be sitting next to you, I think you get everything you need out of that. And I think if you could run that through what we've identified, where I truly believe there's somebody there that can manage that scenario in a manner that will give us the effect that we're looking for.
Mm.
And I think that coupled with giving capacity back to tasks that salespeople definitely don't enjoy, because they want to know about leads, they want to know about businesses that are on the move, businesses that are feeling a bit of pain and what's coming next, and how can we come in with a solution that helps that. They're not interested in admin. They're not interested in, they're interested in the client getting what the client wants from a perfect candidate point of view, and looking at people don't, unicorns don't exist, and working with the client to get the right thing. But they don't want to do the devil's in the detail. They don't want to delve into the LinkedIn and CRM systems and all this type of stuff. So I think splitting the two for me is 100% the right way to go.
Yeah.
So we can give capacity back, and we can reduce the time to hire, in terms of methods that we use, AI, bots. I can't believe I'm saying that because I think it's incredible what these things could do. But I'm kind of an age where I'm going, wow, this is. But honestly, I was at this thing yesterday. It blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. Building bots myself, I was like, whoa, this is something to shout about, But I think what that stuff can do, even from knowing it and then working and experiencing just even that session yesterday. You're pulling things through that still needs to be, you still need to go and do the diligence. You still need to speak to the people. But the information that you can have in your hand from these data points, it's taken a week out of a resourcer, a week out of a researcher. So I think that in its own self will drive performance, far better for us. But it will also take away some of the pain of headcount, because listen, huge headcount, whether they're sales guys, admin guys, delivery guys, account managers, they all come with their own their own world that they're dealing with outside of what we're trying to push their way, you know. So
Yeah.
I accept that, but you know, for me, I think that's to go back to your question. I think, you know, 360 is not for me. I think it's very much sales, client relationship more than, you know, we're not a hard selling organization. You know, we set our stall out to not be that, because I don't
Mm.
think that's what anybody's looking for.
Yeah.
But I think it's that light touch, relevance, having an authority about what you do in your space, empathetic towards a scenario of whatever size, you know, early stage, embryonic, mature business, complete conglomerate, they all come with different nuances.
Mm.
But that, for me, if we get that bit right, or we improve that bit, we have got it right. I'm not saying we've not got it right, but we improve that, and we spend 80% of our time with that headcount just purely focusing on that. I think I think it could be a complete game changer.
Yeah. Well, to your point about the 180 piece, the whenever I've said to businesses, because as you can imagine, as an external coach going in, I see things that business owners don't see because they're sat down next to that recruiter every single day. I'll come in and I'll sit by their side whilst they're doing work and I'm spotting things and I'm like listening to their calls and going, that sounds like not like commercial or strategic. It's a very like fluffy. You're speaking to a business development director of a big conglomerate, and I spot these things. And when I've said to people about that, like little Timmy over there is great at the delivery. They're great with the research, but the sales calls, they don't sound credible on the phone. Maybe they might in the future, but right now I think it's a waste of time for the moment. And also, especially when that person isn't showing that desire to want to do the BD. They're grimacing before each call. They're looking at their day plan as, oh, I've got a BD call sprint. Whereas if I had a BD call sprint, I was jumping up and down because that's the part I found fun, right? So my point is if you've got a business owner that's a bit hesitant to go down the 180 route because what happens if the market shifts? What happens if we're not getting enough job flow? Well, my number one thing I say to people, and maybe you might agree, maybe you might disagree, is that if the market does dip a little bit, if you don't have enough job flow coming in from your salespeople, what are the delivery people doing? Are they just resourcing jobs? Are they just working with the blinkers on? Or are they going out and getting strategic info from candidates? If they don't have jobs to work, rather than saying to them, right, what jobs are you working today, is how many leads can we get? How many new businesses can we get? You're speaking to these
Absolutely.
candidates. How many new candidates can you give the salespeople to take to market? Where I see companies fail when they go 180 is when the delivery people are just sourcing jobs and not communicating at all with the sales function. They're not telling them, Austin, I've just spoken to a phenomenal candidate, 15 years experience. They're just about to leave their job. What can we do with this person? You might not have any jobs, but guess what? That's a master key that opens plenty of doors. So that's where I don't know. Again, maybe you might disagree, might agree, but that's where I see a lot of companies that maybe like tip their toe into the 180 model and then go, oh well, it's not work. We're going to go back to 360.
Yeah, I agree. And listen, the 180 model is, it's not just about doing that, you know, being reactive to things that come in. It's, you know, they could be, you know, there's so many proactive tasks they could be doing. But I think freeing up those tasks away from the natural, you know, going after a top 100, top 200 companies, that takes time. That takes focus. That takes, you know, I think the biggest thing that fails is that consultants give up after two attempts. You know, whether it's an automated process or it's a traditional process. You know, I think there's no getting away from the fact that the market's getting harder to acquire businesses. You know, the getting in the room, the getting the call set up. You know, arranging, you know, meetings with people in the businesses you're even dealing with is tough. But I think if they've got other tasks to gravitate towards, then that's what they'll gravitate towards. Things that you can't monetize, things that don't actually push the business commercially forward. And I think on the delivery function or the research function, there's so many proactive tasks, building, you know, project files so we can be ahead of the curve when that next role comes on. And you know, we've always said that, you know, we're working with people even when there's no roles for them, because I think our job is becoming more and more about taking people out to market. You know, we're not always going to know, but if you've got the best person, that if you've got the best product on the shelf, people will take it. They'll buy it, even if they've got, you know, a setup of other suppliers in place that have been the best of the best. I mean, we've seen it ourselves. You know, we've been working on, you know, search programs in the past that's, you know, ended up quite long-winded.
Mm.
And some other suppliers came in, seeing that that search is open and put the best candidate in front of them, and our search collapses. You know, so being that proactive element on top of that all of the time in the job families that we are really focusing on, really
Mm.
concentrating on, the research function, whether it's offshore or it's sitting next to people in an office, is that right-hand person for that, for
Yeah.
information gathering, for fueling that person's part of that person's week.
Mm.
Um, so absolutely, I think that's where you get that true balance when you get under the skin of, what makes people tick, what's their why, what
Yeah.
do they get out of bed in the morning to do this, what's going to make them keep coming back and doing it even better the next day,
Yeah.
and working towards that kind of common goal. And I
Mm.
think if we, if businesses like ours can get that bit right, then I think you've cracked it.
Hmm.
But
Well,
getting
go.
people to do things that they don't enjoy doing,
Yeah, I
you
mean, you
know,
have to, but
we're humans.
yeah, you're human. And look, I have to tell myself every single day there are aspects you can't see, but I've got like 3 weeks worth of receipts that I've not added to my Monzo account because I've been putting it off. It's been on my to-do list for 3 weeks. It's the most boring, tedious. I should just do it as I go along, but I put it off. But yeah, it's certain things you have to do, even if it's not enjoyable. But back to your point, I think it's a really interesting point for people listening. When I was a recruiter, I typically worked retained, right? I used to get really, really high fees and I would get a project and then I'd be like a partner, an extension of their brand and do a search and advise and we'd do video applications, salary. I added loads of value. But one thing I learned, and I say to a lot of recruiters that I see fall into the trap of what I did, and you get that ego, like, oh, I'm just a retained consultant. I build these searches, is that you don't just have to do that one thing, right? And some businesses I speak to, we don't do spec outs, we don't do mass spec outs. Look, I'm not the biggest fan of like automating spec outs to like the masses and throwing, mind me being crass, throwing stuff at a wall and hoping it sticks. Like I'm not the biggest fan of that. However, if you are working a handful of retained projects and you're a partner and you're adding loads of value and you're doing all these additional things, and you've got a great candidate that might have been rejected, or maybe they rejected that company because it doesn't fit, are you saying you're not going to then go and targetedly spec that candidate out to the market? And like you said, they're like one of the best recruiters I ever worked with, a guy called Akbar, who I've mentioned on this podcast so many times, and he needs to come on the show because he's great. Something he did that was amazing was exactly those two things. He would work a search from start to scratch with a startup in cardiology in Germany and just manage their whole search for them. And he was the best at what he did. But then he would also get candidates that maybe didn't pass second stage interview, and he would know every single company in the circle that was hiring. And even if a company has got an exclusive arrangement with another recruiter, he would call them up and say, I know you're looking for someone with 5 years experience based in Dusseldorf who sold this particular product. My candidate has just been made redundant because they've merged with another business and everyone in Germany has been let go. Here's a person. Oh, we're working exclusively. You're saying you don't want to see this person. They've worked with a competitor and there's no non-compete. Yeah, go on then. We'll have a chat. What's your terms? And he done so much business on both those sides. So again, I think that kind of comes back to, I guess, part of the dying art of recruitment as well is like being able to spot the like the commercial things that are happening in the market, being relevant and understanding and knowing what to take to market, how to take it to market, and how to add value to clients, I think.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, it's exactly that. It's understanding. It's been relevant. It's knowing the marketplace that you're in. It's working the job families that you're working in a manner where you know the movers and shakers. You're looking at the tenures of these people. You've got conversations going on. You might have placed them once, twice, three times before in their career if you've been in this world as long as I've been in it. So I think that's all about relevance. It's all about joining the dots.
Mm,
It's all about knowing your market and going back to that point. If you've got the best product, why would somebody not want the best product? Why would they want to wait longer than they have to wait to fix that problem or that gap? And I think we've got to be all over that, because at the moment it is that piece where we're all, lots of companies are fighting for that small piece of business to win that business, to get those pitches, to get, you know, opportunities on that they're
mm,
also on elsewhere. You want them to work in a manner that they want to work. But listen, everybody's never going to just buy a retained search. If that's not right for them at that time, they're not going to want that. They might not want a contingent. They might want to force a contingent play on you, and people will sell that because it's the easiest thing to sell. So if they get challenged, they'll go down a contingent route just because, oh, well, we'll just do contingent. I think it's understanding that, what, like we said throughout this podcast, is knowing the room, knowing what's going on in that world, knowing what that person's looking to buy, listening to what that person's telling you, listening to the pain points that they've got. It's even driving things for us. We're looking at, embedded solutions and how, that can drive value over contingency. If people have got a headache because their average fee that they're paying is X and they just can't continue to do it, then what's the point of selling a solution that they're not going to continue to do? You could have so many contingent players just pushing and labouring that point. But somebody around here is actually going to go in and go, well, wait a second, let's have a conversation. If you're relevant and you've got authority and you've been able to kind of take that story many times before, don't tell me a customer's not going to listen to that,
Yeah.
because everybody wants the right result at the best possible price. And I don't think it's about, companies just coming into the market and coming in and diluting the value of what we do as a professional service by saying we'll do it at 10%. Where's the value in that? That's just
Mm.
driving our sector one way. But I
Yeah.
think the understanding that the listening, the setting the agenda, the partnership piece, true partnership piece, and people coming to you because they feel you're relevant, they feel they want to partner, and they're open to that type of discussion. That's where people are going to make a difference. That's where there's a voice of reason for for making structured deals in the manner that deals should be structured. And a customer said that to me the other week. I work with you because you do business the right way. We're not trying to just take fees out of people where they've not got the pockets of cash to pay the fees. But if you are prepared to work with that business, understand that business situation,
Mm.
the long-term value in that, um, you know, nobody can tell me different that's not the right way to play.
Yeah, especially these days. Like we've spoken about many times where, I spoke to someone this morning who was talking about this company that has developed a sales agent, but not purely for just going out and qualifying candidates. Like they've positioned this tool as, calling candidates to just confirm they're ready for their interview, or candidates that have applied for the job. They will call them and say, "Hey, I'm Charles's AI agent. You've applied for the job," and it has like this thing where it prompts it to say whether if they're relevant, the call will go one way and say, "Let's book a call with the real Charles," and if they're not, the AI agent will say like, unfortunately you're not right, but we wanted to just let you know, and we've got your file, your CV on file. But I think these days with all this different tech stack that's coming out and stuff like that, I see a lot of recruitment businesses now that are having a lot of success. Um, they are they are looking at different things they can add to a potential client aside from just the CV. Because if you are going out there, as we just spoke about, with the right CV, which let's face it, if you've not called the client and understood the nuances of their culture and the ins and outs of what they're looking for, it is kind of a swing and hope type scenario. If you know your mark and you've been doing it a while, it's not so hopey. It's a little bit more strategic. But if you're also adding on things like I'm got someone coming around my house to do a podcast tomorrow. He talks about mapping out all of their competitors, qualifying everyone from their competitors to understand what's involved in their package, what their interview processes were, how they could be improved, and adding that as part of a service to the client. So I think if recruiters and recruitment businesses want to be seen as more service orientated and less just cowboyish like it was probably when you started and definitely when I started, it's about thinking what additional things can I add to my client as part of this service. That also, to your point, yes, not every company wants to work on a retained basis. But I know so many recruiters and recruitment businesses, Austin, that their retained offering is essentially the same as their contingent. It's just money up front. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, what
Of
else
course
are
it
you
is.
actually
Of
doing?
course it is. Yeah, just yeah. Listen, and I think the tools as well that that are available now. It's how much that client puts represents the that the relevance of that for what they're actually looking to do and the commitment that they're looking to give, and that's ultimately what you're buying. You're getting commitment. I think to drive away from the world of exclusive. Nothing's exclusive, right? I think you can ask for it, you can gain it for a set period of time, but if somebody comes around the stack like you were saying and throws something into the mix, then that could go from your grasp. And I'm not saying that can't happen with a retained piece, but it's that commitment that you're gaining, but from a trusted, partnership piece that you've got in play. You've done it before. That's the way they want to operate, and they see massive value. And I think there is massive value in it. Don't get me
Mm.
wrong. I'm not saying there's no value in that approach. But I think that bit's interesting what you said there. Because I think we definitely, from an SCI perspective, the C stands for consultancy, and I think you'll see many more businesses that will have a consultancy arm to that, which is all
Mhm.
about going in and looking at capacity within teams, with groups, other capabilities and services that you could provide that could provide, a retained recurrent revenue that's not necessarily aligned to a placement. But I think that's added value. I think
Yeah.
there's so many services that, ultimately what we're doing 100% of the time is speaking to people, dealing with people, which HR teams don't do, TA teams don't do all the time. And that's where we can add, a huge amount of weight from an external, adding, an extension to those functions. But I think that there's so many other services that we could give because the knowledge, the database, the networks that we've got, the information that we're gathering from that being our focus, salary surveys,
Yeah.
just data points of things that are going on within competition. We were talking about it the other day around, succession planning, going in and helping business succession plan. When do they
Yeah.
think about that? When it's too late.
Yeah.
I think, and there's, and even in our sector, from a life sciences sector, there's certainly from a senior point of view, you've got people at age profiles that are going to, they're going to come out, the sector, which takes us into that whole world of whether the market's tough and the market's tight and funding's this and funding's
Hmm.
that, and there's still a global talent shortage. There's still skills gaps everywhere.
Yeah.
Interesting in the UK, that some of the right sizing and some of the headcount that's come out of certain areas, people are either going to move out of the UK into different countries, they're going to move into different sectors because they can't keep looking for jobs and looking for jobs and nothing coming around. So I think that I think that's going to worsen. I truly believe that that's going to worsen. But we can protect that sustain that are coming up. We could be doing all of these things by having the right conversation, the right people in the room, and actually sitting and understanding what that looks like. If people like us at arm's length, or companies keep us at arm's length because they don't want us impacted, or they see that if we do a job for them, then it looks like they're not doing their job properly. That's none of that. There's so much involved in creating a partnership that works, but it's
Yeah.
got to start with a discussion. It's got to
Yeah.
start somewhere with a discussion. And I think if you could get to that point,
Mm.
then what you could open up or what you could unearth and how you can support each other,
Hmm.
TAHR and external players like us,
Yeah.
or C-suite and boards is unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
even in the world, the SCI, from a fractional point of view, we're looking at that more and more and more because I don't think that some of these roles will have the investment, the money to carry a full headcount. Even when they
Mm.
did in the past, did it was it the thing that made things collapse? I think that some role types will probably work three different places as long as there's no, but their full-time FTE will be made up of not just going to one place to work every day.
Mm.
But I think it's understanding it and looking at that with
Yeah.
these businesses to understand if that could benefit and that could be a method of working.
Mm.
Um, there's loads of topics for discussion.
Yeah.
Um,
100%. I think
let's
something.
just have the discussion.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think something that you said reminded me of when I was at a company called Projectus, and I kept on getting a similar type of objection around we've got an advert up, we've got an internal recruitment team working in it, and because I could see how long the role had been open for and when the lead had been added to the system, and I'm like your role's been open for like 4 months. Like this isn't a really challenging like CEO level role. Like this is a standard sales rep role, and like I know the cost of the business for not having someone in a high performing territory. Like what's the actual issue here? And it just turned out that they were kind of naive to what a recruiter actually does. And when I said to them, I was like, "Are you familiar with every business that is currently going through mergers, acquisitions? Are you aware of what companies are going to be made redundant? Are you aware of what experienced reps that have got, 5 to 10 year tenure at a company? Do you know which ones that won't be applying for your job are currently looking?" And you'd always get like the eyebrow raised, like, no, we don't. I was like, well, I've got my eyes and ears on all the businesses that are about to be bought or merging or acquiring that will then, naturally make redundancies. I know candidates that have 7 years experience that are performing really well, but they've been there for a while. They've kind of hit a glass ceiling. So if something lands on my desk, they're not going to apply for a job. They're happy. But if I have something that marginally improves that, maybe gives them that next level of progression, they're not going to apply to your job. They're going to go through me. So there's the value that I can offer. And look, if you don't want to pay me money up front because you've been burnt before, or that's just, you don't trust me yet, that's fine. But give me a shot and let me show you what I can do. And I can't say every single search I brought on without doing a spec in the beginning was perfect by no means. But the amount of times that I would take the spec on, speak to my team, and then we'd already had 5 candidates that, had been at these giant businesses, big corporate organizations for 5, 6 years. And they're just some candidates like me. I'd never wanted to work for corporate. Do you know what I mean? I prefer working in a
Yeah, yeah.
startup environment. So you've got these candidates that want to go and work for a startup, but they would never apply for that job. And that right there is like that's what we put into place. We even created a brochure called the Work With Us scheme, the Work For Us scheme, etc. And we had candidates that we essentially mapped their, it's like a career coach. We mapped out their career for them and then used that profile to then open up opportunities, knowing full well that candidate's not working with other agencies. They're not applying to jobs elsewhere. So it's things like that that again, it's because I know this stuff, you know this stuff. A lot of people listening, they're like, oh yeah, actually, that's a bit of value actually I could offer my client. Like these are, in my opinion, these are like the basics, really.
But the whole thing, I mean, even placing a value on just the CRM system for the length of time we've been going, GDPR and all the rest of it, all the things that we keep in touch with to make sure people are happy to remain. Um, the value in that database is huge. The people that have went from when they entered that to different career moves that they've had,
Yeah.
people don't have to start from scratch.
Hmm.
There's a value in a service like that we've got these people there. And I think even, we'll probably come on to tech stack in a sec, but it's like, you know, the the horror stories I'm hearing at the minute, from LinkedIn, and you've got to love it, and you can have any opinion you want on LinkedIn, but they've
Mm.
crippled many businesses over the past period that have had the right size because of licenses.
They're
And I
so
think they've
expensive.
got, it is. But people's reliance on that, and I think it's more, it's more a go-to point, isn't it? It's the easiest thing to open up in the first thing in the morning, go to LinkedIn because it's shiny and it's, I can just go in and I know how to use it. And buying candidates more than once, that's my biggest bugbears and hates, job boards and LinkedIn, and we've already got them on the CRM system. But I think the horror stories I'm hearing at the minute from that is that because TA are running a lot of AI structures,
Mm.
people are applying for things and never hearing back. They're going to black hole and they're the best candidate. You're speaking to them and going, I've applied for that. And you go, well, did you hear back? No, I've not heard a thing. That is just going to worsen and worsen and worsen. And we can tighten the nuts with that, whether that's us taking on the complete recruitment program, whether it's taking on that one activity around that one search, whether it is, just being an addition to that TA team to make sure those things don't fall through the gaps. Because we've had a purposeful call with that individual, and we know that if they're not the best candidate for the job, they're certainly in the top 10.
Yeah.
And people are falling through the traps because the system says no. And that's not good for anybody's, business
Mm.
profile.
Yeah.
For people applying into those types of organizations at any level.
Yeah.
Comms is important, responses is whether good, bad, or indifferent, but just the computer says no. I think that's only going to last for a small period of time.
Yeah, 100%. Well, you mentioned there about the tech stack because we haven't really touched on that, and I'm conscious because we've been running for about an
Yeah.
hour or so. Um, I I've mentioned this probably a few times on the podcast, but I worked with a business last year that were obsessed with tech. They've recruited in the tech market, and because I don't position myself as the guy that's going to come in and look at your operational tech stack and stuff. Like I'm familiar with a lot of them, but I'm always mindful that some businesses, as that's your point around LinkedIn, it's a shiny new tool, and oh yeah, it can help automate this, that, and the other. But I see a lot of recruitment businesses, and recently, since I've been calling people about Milo, a lot of companies are saying, oh, we can't take any more tech stack on. And I've got like friends in the industry that go in and do like a diagnostic on all the tech stack that you're using and trying to eliminate stuff. But with the journey you guys have been on with downsizing and staff, but also looking at the tech stack, like tell us a little bit about that journey that you've been on, because a lot of businesses, I feel like they hire, like I'll give you a good example. I worked with a company this time last year and told them to get some sort of analytics, because without analytics, in my opinion, how the hell can you track how well that person's doing? It's just by feel. It's not how you should do it. And they used one up, but they didn't. Like they had it and they signed up for like 6, 12 months, whatever. The guy didn't even fucking install it. Mind my language, he didn't even install it. Do you know what I mean? I'm like
Yeah.
sat there and
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm coming in to coach your staff, and I'm hearing, oh, I made 50 BD calls last week. There's no evidence of it. Like I'm not a lie, I'm not a human lie detector. Like I need to see the data to suggest like whether you've done that or not. So you have some businesses that they buy tech stack, they don't use them, and then they forget about it, and it's the back of their head. And you've got some tech stack that people use, and like we had some automated SMS system, and I had a demo with some lady in India, and I was like, why are we getting this? And no one bloody used it, and we were signed up for 12 months. So yeah, tell us a little bit about the journey you've been on with the tech stack stuff.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think we've been prone to some of that as well. There's no getting away from it. I mean, every day I could buy a new piece of tech every day. I get calls every day. So it's and I think it's getting worse. The market's getting a lot noisier. Tech coming at you from every angle. I just think people have got to be careful what they buy, because it goes back to what we were saying at the start of this podcast. Some of the things are very much there to help with selling. but they absolutely erode it. Trying to automate sales processes and people never get into the actual point of picking up the phone and speaking to the person,
Yeah.
it's never going to convert anything. So we've had dozens of things in. And we've changed CRM systems. We're now on Job Adder, which I think is a great product and integrates with so many different things. I think I think I think that trying to build our own stuff,
Mm,
even I'm saying at that event yesterday, I'm building my own AI bots, which just blew my mind. And what these
mm,
things can do would actually mean that none of these tech stacks that we ever picked up would be of any purpose. They would be of no relevance to what we're actually trying to achieve today. So the problem we've had is getting out of them. You end up signed in for 12 months, 24 months, trying to get the best deal. I think some of the data points, the data companies, I think these things are vital to be able to kind
yeah.
of to see movement shaking, um, contact details. That's a big thing, isn't it?
Hmm.
If you're talking about getting on the phone, you can only do that if you've got the number to kind of call out. So
Yeah.
I think those things are vitally important. I think there's so many of the tech stacks that you can build yourself, and these bots will absolutely blow a number of these things out the water. In my opinion, I think
Hmm.
there's tech stacks that were very much set up to be one aspect, and I think they've improved massively.
Mm,
Now offering joined up CRM systems,
yeah.
call systems, other AI tracks that are going on within that. And I think as a wholesome piece, that's quite cool. But I don't know if businesses are ready to make that full quantum leap to change CRM systems because
Yeah.
that's never an easy task. That's a big investment, and it's a it's a it's a long process and a painful process to move everything across. Um, but I think it's just, from my advice on that is just, is be careful what you buy because you end up with too many things in the business. And
Yeah.
then once you've got them in the business, you've got to roll them out in a manner that everybody buys into. Because I think as soon
Yeah.
as people stop buying into it, I don't see the value in it, or it's a different way of
100%.
working. You've 100% got to be KPI in these things because all you'll get back from them is average. I mean, we've had probably two or three things in the business where if I look at the ROI on them, I could probably put a zero against it.
Mm.
If
Yeah.
I didn't have it, if I didn't have it, it wouldn't have made the business any different, put it
Yeah.
that way.
I think
And I think LinkedIn, sorry, just to finish, I mean, the LinkedIn
go
thing's in it, because even that, I think lots of companies, there's many companies have went to the wall because of LinkedIn licenses, and
yeah.
that's criminal. It's absolutely criminal. People that
Yeah.
have had 200 staff let go of 100, left with 100 licenses. We've, we've not had the same volume, but we've certainly still had to carry probably 10 licenses that we could have very much done with taking out at a certain point in time.
Yeah.
Um, but listen, that's everybody's reliance on that is so heavy. I mean, I was hearing a couple of things the other day, a couple of events, people that have just went, we're taking LinkedIn out completely. We've got it in the CRM. We've actually looked back on, every placement that we made in the last 24 months, and none of it came from LinkedIn. We had the people in our CRM in the first place.
Yeah.
But I don't think people are monitoring that. We're just too busy trying to stack load information, stuff that we've already got.
Yeah.
And listen, there's a place for all these things if used correctly. But I just think that we end up buying too many shiny balls that we don't need.
Yeah.
Um, and that, and I think that takes us away or distracts us from actually doing the traditional stuff because we're
Yeah.
expecting a miracle. We're expecting these systems to be magicians and come back with, you know, sales, not even sales leads, but new opportunities just off the
Yeah.
back of emails, and that it's never going to happen. People buy from people, like we said at the start.
Yeah, 100%. I think on the tech stack piece, again, I'm not claiming to be an expert, but if anyone's looking at getting tech stack for the sales function, if that particular tech stack enables people to be on the phone more, right? And you can track those things, then great. But then you get a load of other things, and don't get me wrong, they're shiny, and if you've got money for it, great. But little things like and again, I'm not throwing shade, but an AI tech that can format CVs quicker for you. Mate, I formatted CVs so quick. Like it's not difficult. Like, why are we spending extra money on that type of stuff? Like, I'm fine if people want to do that, it's fine. But for me, like when I first set up my coaching business, I had barely any money. Like, all my money was the savings to, God forbid, if anything doesn't happen, then it's paying my mortgage and stuff. But I didn't have anything like Lusher, like the getting like data scraping. Obviously, I still don't have a CRM. I don't think it's necessarily needed for me for what I do. I didn't have any AI automation. I didn't have a LinkedIn premium account. I had a month free that I barely used. Now, The key things that I use are Lusher to get numbers because I cold call and call clients every single day. So I need numbers. LinkedIn Premium so I can see who's like looks at my profile, etc., etc. I use something called Canbox. I think I signed up for like 6 months, and basically all that does is it just adds people in the background rather than me spending my evenings connecting with people. It just automatically adds people. That's fine. A Zoom premium account so that I can do extended calls because it's really embarrassing, but one of my first ever client meetings when I first set my business up, it stopped after 45 minutes. I was like, oh no. And I was like, do I need
Yeah.
a Zoom Pro account or whatever it was? And I didn't realize because it's the first time I've ever trying to run a business. So that was really embarrassing. But those are the key things. And obviously I use other little AI tech stacks for the podcast, of course. But like those are the key things. Now, if I was a recruiter, I think something that could maybe automate my emails, for example. I know some clients that don't do like the mass emails, but they've got like a chunk of data from the CRM that they can use to automate like a weekly newsletter. So it's like value adding, like what's happening on the market, like acquisitions and hot candidates, whatever it is. But the data scraping tools, the email, CRM, absolutely huge. That the whole changing CRM thing, I've worked with a few businesses that have gone through that. Don't envy them. It sounds like a ball ache to go through. But then everything else, really, like in terms of like the sales and marketing stuff, like, I mean, um,
I think the thing with it is because there's so much of it and there's so much, noise about it, and it's creating, a huge number of phone calls to me every day. It must be the same for everybody. Any founder of a business, it must be getting these kind of these calls to try and improve the business. It's
yeah,
just a distraction.
yeah,
It's a massive, massive distraction, and the stuff that you buy just becomes a huge expense.
yeah,
And I think, if you actually sit down and break it all back down, you are, if you're doing all these things, you're doing the same as the next guy. And
mm,
it'll, sort of your kind of, your 1% piece, but
mm,
it's, I don't want to be going the same way as that guy's going, right?
yeah,
If that guy's doing all that shit, I'm going to do some pretty different cool stuff that way to try and get
mm,
the attention levels up. And we were writing a thing the other day. I mean, even going back to old traditional things of writing to people, who gets a letter landing on the lap? Nobody.
yeah,
But everybody's firing emails, darting emails into the same guy, and not getting a response, getting the same response as the next guy.
yeah,
So that for me just doesn't appeal. That's just throwing money down a pan.
mm,
That's not good value. That's not good value add for us as a business. And there's lots of AI things out there that you can honestly build yourself that people are trying to monetize, as many people are trying to monetize many things. But if you actually dig deep on it, there's not a great deal sitting behind it,
yeah.
has been my experience.
Yeah. I mean, like we're going into the world that's going to be dominated by AI, so much so that myself and two other trainers are creating a training product using AI, right? It's just if we don't do that, if we don't adapt and ride the wave as we say, then we're just going to drown basically and just lose
Bit
out.
behind, yeah. Yeah.
And I said I spoke to a guy earlier who's setting up a business similar to what we're doing, but it's to help recruitment businesses manage their AI strategy and their AI tech stack. And he's really immersed in the industry. And when I was telling him a little bit about what we're doing, and I said I was a little bit self-conscious that, because I've only recently somewhat kind of bought into AI. I think I was one of those people that was a bit like scared, like the whole world's going to change and all the rest of it. And I spoke to him today, and I was like, I believe in what we're doing, and I think this is going to help. And he said something to me like, look, your target audience, like what you said, Austin, you're being bombarded by SDRs every single day about this CRM and this AI tech stack. And he was like, the way that you guys have got to look at it is if I've got a trainee consultant that can role play with an AI agent that has been trained by 3 recruitment trainers, or it can give me prompts on the call and it helps me do half a deal a month, then that's your ROI. Like it's helping people do deals. So just lead with that. And as soon as he said that this morning, I've obviously texted our group chat being like, right, why have I not been saying this? Like this is helping people do more deals because that's basically what we do as trainers is the whole point. And you've worked with trainers before. We've had conversations like a good person's going to come in, and yes, it's not easy to track the ROI from someone external, right? But if a consultant comes to you and says, "Oh, so and so just gave me this little thing, and I've qualified this candidate who said they'd never wanted to work with a recruiter," then they do a deal, and a month later, that's money coming back from something that you've invested in. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So I think going back to your point around the tech stack, it's easy to get bought in by a wicked SDR and a shiny new product and stuff like that. But I think it goes back to anything in life, doesn't it? Like if unless you actually really need it and can see it making a massive difference, like if you don't need a new pair of trainers, don't buy a new pair of
Don't get
trainers.
them.
Like,
Yeah.
if you're
Yeah,
going to run a
exactly that.
marathon, you don't have a pair of running trainers, and you've got
Exactly
sore
that.
knees, buy a new pair of trainers. Like that's the way I would
Exactly
probably look
that.
at it.
And I think it's like CRMs. I mean, even CRMs, you get it in and you utilize these things for, 50% of what it can do. And there's lots of things in that that are doing the things that some of these other products that you buy in are telling you they could do.
Yeah.
You're duplicating. You're also duplicating,
Yes, that's another huge thing.
It's a huge thing. You don't know what you've got because you don't invest the time in the products that you've got, and so there's only so much tech. Tech can absolutely help. Tech could capture lots of stuff. I'm convinced about these bots, as you could probably, yeah. But I think it's not the future, it's happening now. So we've got to get to the party quick. With that. But I think embedding that is for me gives me far more. Um, I'm far more convinced around that than I am around tech stack that we have applied and tech stack that I'm probably never going to apply, even though these people are trying to speak to me day in day out.
Yeah.
Because there's no benefit. There's no benefit to it.
Yeah.
And like I say, if everybody's doing it, why do I want to do the same thing?
Yeah. Before we wrap up to the final question, I'll be remiss if I didn't ask you because you've mentioned these bots like five, six times, and there might be people listening to this going, Charles, bloody ask him, like,
No,
what are
he's
these
mad.
bots?
He's off
Like,
his head. He's off his head.
just tell me, because I think, what was the name of the thing that you went to yesterday?
I was out at it was the TRN network. It was the recruitment network, and that was we were talking. I mean, AI's covered everywhere, but it was a
Yeah.
big piece on that to talk about AI and how you can embed it,
Okay. Yeah, I was
things
going
that
to
it
say
can
because
do.
yeah,
And we were building.
my business partner went to an AI event, but I think he said it wasn't specifically recruitment focused, and he's come back and
Okay,
he's literally tried to call me twice whilst we're doing the podcast. But tell me a little bit about, like, you've mentioned these bots, like, and you're designing them yourselves. Like, what are they?
but I think it's just task related. So treat these people where they're actually like humans. They're like part of your team. So you
Yeah.
actually forge and form part of your org structure. But they're doing some of the menial tasks that consultants just never get to or never want to do. But the lists could be endless. There could be hundreds of topics, hundreds of tasks that you can
Mm.
actually have these things doing. I think invested in that in the right way, where you're instructing these people, you're prompting these things to give you push back what you want, not just using ChatGPT as a standard ChatGPT type item, but building these things to help give capacity back. Some of the searches I did when we built them yesterday were things that we would, like I said before, we would be working on for a week. But the information that they were pulling back, if you're investing enough time and putting the right data and detail into that,
Mhm.
it was coming back with a long list of people that would take me a research team, resource team, a week to gather within a 5 minute window. Now, I'm looking at that and getting very excited by it. You've got to go and then go and speak to these
Yeah, of
individuals and see
course.
if it is
Yeah.
relevant. But I think to just have that information at your fingertips, from all the scraping that it could do, all the different data points that it's pulling from, it blew my mind. I know I can't get a human to do that. That's an
Yeah.
impossible task. So I think for me, if we can, like I said, humanize or keep humanizing the areas that need humanized, that will never be taken away from AI, and then look at where these, implementing these scenarios could benefit the people that are utilizing it to enhance their productivity, their outreach. We'll make them better humans, better recruitment people, better consultants, better managers, better, client relationship people. We'll make them better everything.
Yeah.
Um, it's one, it's one item,
Mm.
but it will soak up a huge number of tasks that I know that I've got people that they just never get to them in a week, never get to them in a month, never get to them in a quarter. So, and listen, they don't have sick days. What's not have
Yeah.
sick days? They're free and they work
Yeah.
24/7 for you. So what's not to
Yeah.
love?
And they're not being kept up three, four times a night by a 5 month old. So yeah,
Well, this
happy
is true.
days.
Exactly that.
I've
Exactly that.
literally, I had a guy called Brandon on my podcast, and we were talking about, like, his 1% thing was around being consistent and showing up. But he's also a big mental health advocate. And he was saying that, look, I used to beat myself up if I had a single day of the week where I wasn't up for it. And he's a solo recruiter now, works for himself. And he says, mate, I've got a boy, a young boy. There are some days where I'm just not in the state of mind to be making sales calls and stuff. So I do other things. But he said to me, like, if you have one day a week or one day a fortnight, don't beat yourself up about it. It's when it starts to become like a habit when it's every single
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
And I just said to him, I was like, mate, I'll be honest, like I've been beating myself up, but I don't know whether it's right because there have been days like not last night, the night before, where baby fed the baby at like 10:30, she wakes up at 1, then she wakes up at 3, then she wakes up at 5, and then I'm trying to rock her to sleep at like 5 in the morning and I've got a sales call at 8. And I'm just like, mate, on days like that, I'm trying. I genuinely am trying, but I'm looking at my screen just going, oh my God, my brain is just struggling so much on days like that.
Listen, we're all human. That's, and I've been through that pain, but it's, I think it's and people that are at different stages. Don't kick yourself up. We're not going to be on, 100% on point every day. You can't be. It's impossible. This engine is probably the best engine ever created, best bit of tech ever created, but it's going to have a down day. I think, and you just got to work around that. But I think
Yeah,
there is flexibility to work around that if it's captured and managed in the right method. And like you say, it doesn't become a habit. When it becomes a habit, it's just a runaway train.
yeah,
And I think people get then too caught up that they can't claw it back to get out of that headspace. But I think, listen, wellness, mental health is vitally important in the world we live in today. But I think everybody deserves to be able to deal with that in a manner that protects them and gets them through to getting them to that place where they're working at the optimum level, or at least
yeah,
90% of the optimum level, 4 days, 3, 4 days of the week.
yeah. Well, I need to go out and design myself some bots to do the things that I don't want to do. That'll be my task after.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, look, I really appreciate you coming on the show. As you know, the final question I finish every episode off with is following this particular episode, how can people listening get 1% better in recruitment?
I mean, I think I mentioned it there. I think doing things different to the next guy. Why go in the same direction as 100 other people? Think about that. Think about being relevant. Think about being an authority in that particular space. I think if you're relevant and you are an authority in that route, then people will look in and be interested in what you've got to offer. And I think for me, definitely getting that swing from 80% of tasks that don't make you money, 20% the tasks that do it, you flip it the other way. It's got to be 20% of those tasks do get taken care of, whether it's through bots or whether it's not. But it's I think focusing on the things that are traditional elements, that are kind of that are enhanced by the use of AI and the use of these tools that have never been available ever before. We're in a world where we've got more tools at our grasp, at our fingertips. Use them to benefit, but use them to benefit you getting out and about and getting into the room to have these right discussions. Because without these discussions, nothing happens. You don't deal create, you don't nurture a relationship, you don't create new relationships. Client acquisition just stops. And if all of that stuff stops, then who keeps the lights on?
Spot on.
So that would be my 1%. And it's
Love it.
marginal gains, isn't it? So,
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I know it's really cliche, but like I should say this as the doing the 1% better recruitment podcast. But like if you're trying to get 1% better every single day, like 365% better by the end of the year. And a guy that I did a training session with actually emailed me yesterday, I think last night. And I can't remember what it specifically said, but it said something about like the marginal gains and just try and beat who you were last week. Like just every single month, just
yeah.
anything. Like if you've had a tough month, if you've not done as much in terms of the numbers that month, but you've got a steady pipeline, but you went to the gym more or you had more client conversations, like just always try to do little tiny things. And to your point, trying to be a little bit different and just every single month, realistically, you should be looking back at yourself and going, I've leveled up a bit. Because if you're not, I
Yeah.
think that's the whole, like this gets spiritual and stuff, but like when you think about like the meaning of life, like, surely the meaning of life is trying to get to as close to your potential, or to just every single year you look back and you've evolved somewhat. Like that's
Yeah.
for me, that's what I think it is.
But try and hit your potential because you get one shot at it, don't you? And I think that that it's such a sports mentality as well. These Premier League footballers, whoever it might be, that's what they're going for: 1% marginal gains. Trying to get that into their forum to get their forum right week on week. And that's all we can do. Critique what we did before. If we missed something, why did we miss it?
Yeah,
What we're going to do to avoid it. But there's no point in reaching for the stars. You'll never get there. If you don't do it on a percentage-based approach. That's that's life. That's life for sure.
100%. Awesome. Well, look, Austin, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a long time coming. Really enjoyed this. I'll put all your details at the bottom, anyways. And
Yeah, fantastic.
yeah, really appreciate you coming on. And for everyone that's made it this far, we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed. As I've said before, if you are not subscribing and following on whatever platform it is that you're listening or watching this podcast on, please go and do that. It really, really helps the show. I've got a monthly newsletter that gives you a roundup of every single episode. We're securing sponsorship to grow the podcast, to make it better. For people that have been listening or watching to this podcast from the early days, you would have seen a natural progression in terms of the production quality, a lot more face-to-face interviews, etc. So we're only going to get better. We're planning on doing events. We're planning on having some incredible people on. So do us a favor, like, comment, subscribe, all those types of good things, and reach out to me. Let me know what your best episode is. Let me know who you'd want to see on the podcast. And if you are also interested yourself, I've always got space for cool people that want to share things that they're really, really passionate about. So here's to getting 1% better. Here's to elevating the recruitment industry. And I'll see you next week.